Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 11 of Navigating NewSpace, produced by the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship Program. The MAT Fellowship is an internship and mentorship program meant for young leaders in the area of commercial spaceflight and looks to create an ethical look at the future of the commercial space industry. Today, I'm so excited to welcome one of our 2020 fellows, again, an amazing class who keeps volunteering for this. Today, Eric Hinterman is going to join us. Eric is a Ph.D. student at MIT in aeronautics and astronautics working on MOXIE, an instrument on Mars 2020 that will produce oxygen on Mars. Eric originally went to Notre Dame for chemical engineering and began a career in that industry, in the chemical industry, but realized that his passion was in human spaceflight and decided to go to MIT to learn how to put humans into space. Eric, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad to be here.
Where are you joining us from?
I'm at MIT right now. We are back on campus. Some of the grad students are, at least, those doing research that need to be here, but most of the undergraduate students aren't here, so it's kind of empty, actually.
Oh, that's exciting. How far into your PhD are you?
This is my 5th year. It's a joint master's and PhD program. So my first 2 years were the master's, and now I'm 3 years into the PhD. So we're getting close to the end.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
It's a journey for sure.
Yeah.
So before we get into talking about your research in your PhD and everything human spaceflight, I wanted to get started by talking a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today, in the hope that it helps other people who are watching see a little bit of what their journey might look like ahead of them.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you want to take it off, you can. The first question I wanted to ask is if you had any early space memories, and if so, what they were.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my journey is kind of interesting, I think, because I didn't immediately go into space, as you said, but I've always been interested in space. I guess one of my first memories is when I was, I think, 4, I told my parents that I wanted to be an astronaut doctor. And I saw that as a real opportunity, not knowing that there were MDs as astronauts already, because I figured when they were up in space, the astronauts could get sick and somebody would have to take care of them. So I thought that was my way into the space industry. Later, I learned that, of course, that actually is the case already. And I also realized that medicine was not really for me. But that's probably my earliest space memory. And yeah, I was always really interested in it as a kid.
So you wanted to be the rocket surgeon that I've seen on all the memes.
I did, yeah, that's right.
Oh, that's super fun. So was it always space? Did you know from then onwards that this is what you were going to be doing?
No, it was not. And I'm not really sure why. I always liked space, but I liked a lot of other things too. And, you know, I also wanted to play in the NBA and things like that. But once I got into high school and started really thinking about careers and majors that I would do in school, I ended up choosing chemical engineering. I really liked chemistry. I knew I wanted to be an engineer. I grew up in a city with a lot of chemical engineers. It's the headquarters of one of the largest chemical companies in the world. So that may have influenced me as well, because I saw a lot of job opportunities in the industry. And so that's what I did in undergrad. And I liked it. I wasn't passionate about it, but I liked it, and got my degree, went into the chemical industry. And it wasn't until 3 years into my career that I really started to realize I wanted to do something that I was more passionate about. I had a good job and I enjoyed it, but I knew that, you know, after 40 years of doing that job, I probably would look back and think that I had missed an opportunity to do something that I cared a lot more about and that I was more passionate about. And so I had what I call my early life crisis when I was 24 and realized I was doing the wrong thing and wanted to make a change in my career before, you know, I got too locked into it. And so I ended up quitting my job and going to MIT to get an aerospace degree so that I could find my way into the space industry.
Wow. So that sounds like a pretty amazing pivot, all said. Was it particularly scary at the time? And how did you go about making that kind of a change?
Yeah, it was pretty scary. I skipped a step as well. I actually, I started realizing chemical engineering wasn't what drove me every day. And so I thought maybe making money would, honestly. And so I actually started getting my MBA at night at Carnegie Mellon because I lived in Pittsburgh at the time. And so I'd work during the day and get my MBA, go to class at night. And after a year of the MBA is when I really realized this isn't doing it for me either. Money is not something that drives me. Obviously, it's great. You kind of need to have enough, but making a lot of extra money wasn't something that I knew I'd be passionate about for very long. And so that's when I was like, all right, I'm like 2 strikes in. Chemical engineering isn't really working for me. Neither is the MBA route. And so I took 6 months, I think, to really stop and think about what career I really wanted to do. And honestly, it came down to either working in renewable energy or working in the space industry. And I was back and forth for a long time, but I ended up choosing space exploration as the thing that I wanted to do, that I thought I'd be good at, that I could contribute to, and that would be an exciting career for me. So yeah, it was a long journey, and it was definitely scary because I quit my job and took a leave of absence from Carnegie Mellon all at the same time to move out to Boston and start school again. So definitely a big change, but it's totally been worth it.
Absolutely. So you said that you were thinking about the future and just imagining 40 years of your job and knowing that you liked it, but it wasn't going to last forever. I've talked to a fair number of people who have transitioned into the space industry later in life as they've started to realize that it was an option for them and that there were more careers in space than they initially realized. Yeah. Was there a defining moment where it really hit you that you needed to make that change, or was it a slow realization?
I definitely think it was a slow realization over the 3 years when I was working, but really I was halfway through my MBA. And I was like, this isn't going to do it for me either. I'm making a change into something else that I'm, equally interested in, but not as passionate about. So what am I doing bouncing around here? So I think that there was kind of a moment at that point. And it's like you said, I think that actually most aerospace engineers or people in the space industry in general that I've talked to always knew they wanted to do it, like since they were 2 years old. And that's all that they've worked towards their whole life. And I didn't have that realization, I think, until I was 25. So it's interesting to hear you say that other people also had the same experience. I liked space when I was a kid. I just never thought to make a career out of it. And I don't know why I never thought of that. Maybe I just didn't know it was possible. So.
Yeah, I've talked about it before on prior episodes, but I had the same experience. And I think other people must have too. I thought space was cool. I remember flipping through Cosmos and looking at all the awesome pictures, exactly. But I never really said, I should plan a career into space. Right. It seemed a little bit far-fetched at the time. So it's very cool that now the space industry is opening up in a way that allows so many more people to flock to it.
Yeah, and I will say in my 5 years now in the aerospace world, I think it's fairly rare for people to leave the space industry. And that's a very good sign for me. Hopefully it means that I picked a field that people tend to be passionate about their entire careers. That's what I'm looking for. And I think that that's what we have here.
I'd agree. And on a lighter note, if you manage to make it through an entire Ph.D. in aerospace, there's a pretty good sign that you're not going to drop out. You would have already.
Hopefully. It's been a lot of fun though. So it's been a good experience.
That's so cool. So for you, it was human spaceflight. When you took that 6 months of reflection, that was the answer you came upon?
Yep. That's it. I think I was looking for a few main things in the career that I wanted to pick. One was something that I could be good at. Another thing on the list was things I was passionate about. So as an example, I'm pretty passionate about composing music, and I think I'm decent at it, but I don't think that I could excel in it and make a career out of it. So it was on my list, but it didn't really meet that other criteria of something I could be good at. So I was looking for something I was passionate about, something I was good at, and I think something that's really important for humanity is what I wanted. And the last point, the last point I think is what makes careers fulfilling. I think for a lot of people is if you know that you're doing good in the world and making the world a better place, you want to keep doing it. And so those were kind of the big three things I was looking at. And like I said, renewable energy, I think, fits those three for pretty obvious reasons. Space exploration might not fit that third criteria for as obvious a reason as renewable energy. But I think that human space exploration is very important for us as a species and to move us forward in the world. So once I realized it fit those three criteria, that's kind of what pushed me into it.
That's awesome. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? I think that's a question we've been talking about a lot, both in this segment and on the larger scale throughout the community, how human spaceflight is worth it. For those who are maybe more new to the industry, we have our uncrewed spaceflight. We have, robotic missions that we can send all over the solar system. And, some people like to argue that human spaceflight isn't worth it in certain scenarios. Yeah. Eric, what do you think is worth it about human spaceflight, and when does it really help other people and do good?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I love answering this question. And I'm ironically wearing a robotic mission t-shirt right now. I'm going to talk about why humans should also explore space. But one question that gets asked a lot is why do we spend money on space, especially human space exploration, when there's so many problems to fix here on Earth? And my response to that generally is, first of all, I don't think it's a very fair question because it sort of implies that there will be a point in the future when there aren't problems on Earth, and then we can feel justified spending money on things like space exploration. I really don't think there's going to be a point in the future when all the problems are solved on Earth. So the question sort of, I think, should transition into what is interesting or what is useful about space exploration that we're spending money on it. And for that, I think that my answer centers around the fact that I think that in the future, it's a more exciting future if we have humans in space and if we're exploring space. There's a lot of other benefits that come with it: technological development, funding new companies, creating jobs in that way, uniting people, uniting nations in giant collaborations for human space exploration. There's a lot of really great things that come out of it, but fundamentally, I think the reason that we should explore space is because it's exciting and it's inspiring. It makes the world a more exciting and inspiring place. And that's something that I am happy to contribute to and to dedicate my career to, is making the world a more exciting and inspiring place. So yes, there's lots of other benefits that come out of it that are more tangible than that. But if we're going to work on something collectively as a species, I think that exploring space and understanding what's out there and our place in it is, one of the most fundamental and exciting things that we can do.
Oh, wow. After hearing that, I have something to admit. It turns out that before knowing you, I was plagiarizing your exact answer for years. Yeah. That is precisely how I feel about it. It's just a wonderful idea that we can work together, that we can bring technologies and innovations back to Earth, but that fundamentally by pursuing space, it leads to a more exciting world that will have more opportunities for those who seek it.
I think so. I can't imagine, in 1,000 years, I don't know what's going to be going on with humanity, but I can't imagine that people will be content to just to remain on Earth and to just give up on what else is out there in the universe. That just doesn't seem realistic to me. And so if I think that by that logic, humans are definitely going to explore space, why not do it now and why not be a part of it?
It's beautiful. So, I mean, it is, it's cheesy, but we get cheesy every single one of these segments. Space is fun, space is hard, but space is also a very beautiful thing. And it's nice to be able to appreciate the work we do as more than just work.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I just realized I totally ignored half your question, which was why humans versus robots.
Yeah.
So I think that both have a place for sure. Robotic missions are great for scouting things out. For example, we've sent a few rovers to Mars now. Another one is on its way right now, and that's what I work on. And one of the primary missions of that rover, it has 3 primary missions, and one is to pave the way for humans to go there. So it's exploring the surface, it's figuring out how to generate resources that humans need for survival on the surface, and it's helping us understand more about the atmosphere what's underground, if there's water, things like that. So robots certainly are a much cheaper way to explore places that are far out and give us information that we need to send humans there safely. So absolutely necessary. But I think if we don't ever send humans beyond low Earth orbit, and we're missing the main part of my answer, which was that it's exciting and inspiring for us as a race. I just think people remember Apollo a lot. People were inspired by Apollo. People changed their lives because of what they saw on the TV when we landed on the moon. I don't hear people say that about when we first landed, a probe on Titan or a lander on Mars or something like that. They were exciting, but people didn't change their lives for it. So I think there's definitely an important part to the human aspect.
Interesting. So a bit of a follow-up on that. What do you see in the future of human spaceflight? And obviously the long-term future, you can see a lot. So how about we narrow it down to the next 50 years or so? What do you see happening, and what are you most excited for in human spaceflight?
I'm extremely excited for the commercial side of the space industry to contribute to human spaceflight. So in the past, it's almost solely been government organizations that have funded human spaceflight, and that's still mostly true today. But now we're seeing companies that are developing their own human spaceflight programs. SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin. Some of them are space tourism on Earth, but I think that there's loftier goals behind a lot of these companies where they actually want to send humans farther than that into space. And the reason that I say that's exciting is, unfortunately, government funding is dictated on a cyclical basis. If we get a new president or we get turnover in Congress, then the direction of the funding can change. And so human spaceflight programs can be canceled or can be switched around, and we lose a lot of progress that way. And so what I'm excited about is having an industry that's driven by revenue, driven by deadlines, as opposed to driven by government funding, is something that may push us into space a lot faster than has been possible the past 50 years. And just to elaborate a little bit on that, a lot of people are frustrated that we managed to go to the moon, that long ago, and what have we been doing since then? Why haven't we done anything beyond that? And I think a lot of it is for the reasons I just stated, it's political reasons. So if there's an industry behind it that's driving it rather than political reasons, I'm really excited to see where that can take us.
Yeah, the idea of a self-sustaining space economy, one that literally goes where it wants to based on the merit of its products, is a pretty incredible concept that we've never come close to before.
Yeah, that's what gives me hope that we'll actually be sending humans to different places in the solar system during my career, and that's why I decided to get into this.
Makes total sense. So you can feel free to pass on this next question. I say that, a little bit edged in because, there are some things that are just hard to guess on, and sometimes we just don't want to make guesses. But if we're talking about human spaceflight, I think it would be remiss if we didn't mention the Artemis program. It's coming up in the news fairly often now. It's supposed to be how we return to the moon. And yet within the space industry, there's a fair amount of chatter back and forth about when and in what form it will finally happen. What do you think of the human space program on that front?
Yeah, Artemis is one that I've thought a lot about. There's a lot of really good things coming out of Artemis. I think that there's a greater sense of urgency than with past programs that are similar to it. Obviously, I've lived more through this one than in past ones, but I've studied some of the past programs. And I think that, it was a shorter deadline this time. It was a 4 or 5 year deadline after they announced it. And so that gives a huge sense of urgency. And I've witnessed it as well. I've witnessed a lot of the developments through the work that I'm doing here and through some of my internships the past few summers. So I've seen a lot of progress, and I'm hopeful for that. Actually landing on the moon by 2024, I'll admit I'm pretty skeptical about it. I'm a huge fan of human spaceflight, so I would be overjoyed if I was proven wrong in that regard. but there's a lot that needs to come into place, and a lot of commitment that needs to be made politically in the next 4 years to keep us on track for that. So that's what I'm most nervous about. But if we can, commit to the funding for it and commit to the workforce for it, then I know that, the people at NASA and all the contractors that they're hiring are working towards it pretty hard right now. So yeah. I'm excited, but a little skeptical.
I feel the exact same way. I think it would be beyond cool. It was one of the more exciting moments, memorable historical events that I can remember. It was kind of like Curiosity landing in the 7 minutes of terror. And then after that, it was Artemis getting announced and imagining returning to the moon, sending women to the moon. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I see it the same way as you. It would be difficult to get there by 2024, just based on the momentum that we've seen so far.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the push in Artemis is to make it sustainable this time, meaning we go to the moon to stay on the moon and then go to Mars. And I think that, that goal of first going to low Earth orbit, then going back to the moon, and then eventually going to Mars has been pretty constant at NASA in some form or another for the past few decades. Mm-hmm. So I think that also may play into the timeline. I think that if we wanted to just get somebody to Mars, get the first woman on Mars, on the moon, I think that we could do that. 2024, I think we could do it if the funding stays there. But if we're trying to make it sustainable and we're trying to actually build a lunar base and have return missions that are consistent, you have to spend a little bit more time planning it and setting up infrastructure and managing your missions. And so that does put another potential delay on it. So
definitely. For those who might not be so familiar, this talk about sustainability and going to the moon to stay, that's a really big topic of conversation nowadays. Could you elaborate a little on why you think it's so important and how it will change the future of our journey into space?
Yeah, so the Apollo mission, I don't know if they had plans to be sustainable. There was a lot of plans that were drawn up in that era of moon bases, Mars bases, future exploration of the solar system. But in reality, it was a race to get to the moon. It was a political race. And so that was the priority, was getting there first. And I mean, there were subsequent missions, but there weren't too many of them. And then eventually we shifted more towards a low Earth orbit research station focus. That's eventually how the International Space Station was born. Now the goal is not just to repeat the Apollo era and send a few missions to the moon and walk on the moon, plant a flag on the moon, and then come back home. NASA and the space industry as a whole wants something more than repeating Apollo. And so their way, what they've decided is to instead make it a sustainable presence on the moon, where we send missions to the moon and slowly build up infrastructure on the moon in order to explore it more and to have essentially what's called a moon base. They're still working out the details if they want to send missions to the same spot and build up infrastructure, or if they want to send a few missions to different spots on the moon to get more exploration done. But the end goal is the same, is to be more sustainable so that we can have longer and longer missions on the moon in order to learn how to live on another planetary body. And eventually we can use those learnings to send humans to Mars more safely.
Very cool. I personally love how in every single slide deck that I see about Artemis, they do talk about all their moon plans because it's the point of the program and they need to, but they always manage to include that line, and then to Mars. It's very exciting to me because I've read about so many failed attempts to do just that. And finally, it seems like in our lifetimes, it will happen.
I plan on it happening. And I know that line that you're talking about, onto Mars, makes my former boss at NASA, Michelle Rucker, pretty happy because she leads the Mars integration group at NASA. And so she's been getting a lot of calls from Artemis, like how can we help you with your plans to get to Mars? So
I love that. That's great. Mm-hmm. That's so awesome to hear. So personally, like you just said, if it's up to you, you're going to make sure that we get to Mars in your lifetime. do you have any other long-term goals, what you want to do in your career, any moon shots, or in this case, Mars shots that you want to make happen?
Yeah, so what I decided 5 years ago, I guess, when I decided to go into the space industry, was my target role that I would have at the end of my career, the thing that I'd be driving towards, is to be the director of human Mars missions. And that could be at NASA, that could be at a commercial space company, who really knows. But the role that I want is to run the human missions to Mars. And so have the flight crew, the mission crew, the operations crew underneath, reporting to me or have oversight over that program. So I'm doing everything I can to learn about human spaceflight, to learn about missions to Mars, which is why I'm really happy to be working on the Mars 2020 rover mission, and to really understand what we need to do to get humans to Mars. So that's my long-term goal. Obviously, that job doesn't exist today because we're not sending people to Mars. So I'm hoping and planning that towards the end of my career is about when that job will start to actually exist in the industry. Up until then, I'm going to be taking jobs to put more things into space, develop better rockets, develop better environmental control and life support systems for humans, working on in situ resource utilization so that humans can survive off the Earth, and trying to learn as much as I can about human spaceflight.
That's fantastic. So in terms of Mars 2020, that is your PhD research?
Yeah, that's correct. I work on the MOXIE instrument, which is, for people that don't know, when we send rovers to Mars, obviously they drive around and stuff and you have the rover body, but the purpose of doing that is that it hosts a suite of science instruments. And so the Mars 2020 rover has 7 different science instruments on it. A few of them are cameras, and so we get a lot of great pictures of Mars in all bands. I mean, there's X-rays, spectroscopy systems and things like that as well. So it's not just like normal cameras that we think of, science cameras. But one of the other instruments that I work on is called MOXIE, and that stands for the Mars Oxygen ISRU experiment. ISRU is in situ resource utilization. It's an area of aerospace engineering, and it essentially means using resources at a destination site to make what you need. So in the case of Mars, what MOXIE is trying to do is it's trying to make oxygen on Mars so that we don't have to bring oxygen from Earth for astronauts when they eventually go there. The way that it's making oxygen on Mars is it's using the atmosphere. So most people might not know this, but the atmosphere of Mars is almost pure carbon dioxide, CO2. And so that means there's 2 oxygen atoms attached to every carbon in the atmosphere. And if we can somehow pull those oxygen atoms off, we can form O2 and use that for humans to breathe, but more importantly, as rocket propellant to get astronauts back home from Mars safely. And so that's the whole purpose of MOXIE, is to take the atmosphere of Mars and show that we can convert it to oxygen so that eventually a much larger system could be sent to support a human mission.
So to expand on in situ resource utilization, or ISRU, that's something that is coming into play already when we think about the lunar surface and how we can possibly survive there. And so learning how to, as a group, use ISRU to our benefit is extremely important. For Mars, I would say even more so, because it's so far away that it would be fundamentally a lot more expensive to get that fuel to Mars.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the purpose of it. You use ISRU so that you don't have to send resupply missions from the Earth. And so, if inside wherever you live, your apartment, your home, you don't have to grow all your own food probably because there's a grocery store nearby you can go to. If you're on Mars, there's no grocery stores. So you have to figure out how to use the resources around you to grow your own food. But besides food, you also have to figure out how to get water, how to get oxygen, how to get rocket propellant, all these things. And that's where ISRU plays a big role. And it's exactly like you said, the farther away you are from Earth, the more important ISRU becomes, because it's more and more expensive to launch missions to resupply you.
Yeah. Great point. So as we start to wrap up, I thought of a question that you may already have an answer to, or you may have to come up with on the fly. let's say you make it. You are the director of Mars missions at a private company, at NASA, however. What would be your ideal Mars mission if you were to design and send any mission?
One that gets astronauts there and back safely.
Yeah, that's a really good thing. That's a good candidate answer.
Obviously that's the priority. It's an inspiring mission if we land on Mars, but it's a much more successful and inspiring mission if we safely return the astronauts back home. It's a tragedy if we don't. So that has to be the focus. That's why MOXIE is so important. It is right now prohibitively expensive to send a fully fueled rocket to Mars that astronauts can then launch and bring back home. And cost is a major driver. So if it's prohibitively expensive, we're not going to send a human mission to Mars. ISRU can alleviate that by making it way cheaper to fill up a rocket on Mars using the local resources. So that would be the focus. I've thought a lot about Mars missions. I think it'll for sure change in the future. But some of the aspects of it, I think that you have to have a pretty good sized crew. There's been skeleton crews that have been ideas that have been put forth by people and agencies of sending 2 people to Mars. I don't think that's a good idea. I think you probably want a crew of 6. First of all, you need a range of skills to be covered. You're either going to be staying on the Martian surface for a month at the very shortest, or for a different type of mission, 500 days. And so, 2 people, can they maintain a habitat, grow their own food, maintain the ISRU systems, pilot the rocket, all these things? I don't think so. So I think you need to have a good set of skills covered. But perhaps most importantly is the psychological aspect. Putting 2 people into a small metal can and shooting them into space for 3 Earth years, 2 to 3 Earth years, and seeing how they do is not a good idea, I don't think, no matter how easy they are to get along with. Isolation becomes a really big issue. And so I think a larger crew is a little bit healthier in that respect too. I think by the time we do it, robotics will play a huge role in it. AI systems will hopefully travel along with them, and hopefully more advanced robotics than we have today to assist and to help out with a lot of the habitat maintenance, piloting, entry, descent, and landing, that sort of thing. And honestly, I think that I'm hoping that they will be able to grow some of their own food. I have worked on a project designing a Mars greenhouse to grow food on Mars, and it's possible.
Potatoes?
We could definitely grow some potatoes, yeah. But there's a lot of other good foods that could be grown as well. And so things like that, trying to really reduce the risk of the mission and enable the crew to have a healthy and efficient time on the surface. I think those are the sorts of things that we really need to start thinking about.
Excellent. Well, that paints a picture of a really exciting future.
Yeah, I think so. And honestly, yeah, it may be a company, it may be an agency, or it could be a collaboration between international agencies. I would not be surprised by that at all. So honestly, I think it would be amazing to have a group of astronauts representing a whole bunch of different countries all travel to Mars for the first time together. What a great future that would be.
And that idea has a special place in my heart for sure.
Yeah.
So to wrap up for today, how do you like to stay informed about current space happenings? And if people want to learn more about things like humans to Mars, where do you recommend that they go to learn a little bit more about what you do and what humans might be able to do soon?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm spoiled because I'm surrounded by it here in the Astra department at MIT. But before I came to grad school and I was trying to learn everything I could about it, there's a whole bunch of daily news articles that I subscribe to. Space.com does a really good job, and you can get emails from Space.com with the 3 biggest headlines from the space industry. And you'll start to see other articles from I think LiveScience.com, stuff like that have a whole bunch of good articles. Apart from that, honestly, just doing your own research on something that interests you. So I was interested in Mars, so I just started looking up, what do humans need to do to get to Mars? And then I found things like the Mars Society is a group that exists, and they put out a lot of great work and essays on information related to Mars. There's a whole bunch of groups like that if you start digging around on the internet for a topic that interests you. And yeah, so that's mostly how, I get daily email updates of all the major space articles and just kind of follow the rabbit hole from there to learn about all this stuff.
That's a good way of describing it. It can be tough at the beginning, but then once you get the ball rolling, you get inundated with space news.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's probably a better source, but honestly, I think space.com is what I used. And then once you start getting daily articles, you click on them and then you see a bunch of other links and related content. And then you end up finding yourself with way too many cool things to read. So yeah, that's probably the most important part.
Awesome. Well, Eric, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Do you want to close out on any other pitches for Mars or otherwise?
I don't think so. Do we pitch the fellowship at all here? I really love
I pitched the fellowship for sure. We got so involved talking about humans going to space, but yeah, the fellowship.
Okay, I'll do both. So first, the Mars 2020 mission lands on Mars February 18th, 2021. So we're only 4 months away. It's going to be really exciting. Hopefully we have a safe landing. It's going to be really scary, but if we do land safely, keep an eye out for MOXIE making the first oxygen on Mars. And a lot of the other science instruments are going to be doing really exciting things, mapping the underground of Mars, understanding the atmosphere. It's got a camera that can shoot a laser at a rock and vaporize it in order to tell the mineral constituents of the rock. So a lot of cool stuff that'll be coming out of that. But then the fellowship, the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship Program, if anybody watching this is thinking about applying, please do. I've talked to a couple of my friends here and they said, you told me about it, but I just don't think I'm qualified. And I couldn't believe it. It blew my mind because there aren't, as long as you meet the basic criteria and everything, really it's just about people that are passionate about making an impact in the space industry. And so if you're passionate about space and you want to work in the commercial space industry, it's probably the best fellowship that you can apply for, in my opinion. So it's great. Some of the awesome things about it, you get paired with a really great mentor. Mine is George Whitesides at Virgin Galactic. And I had a bunch of great conversations with him and learned a lot from him about leadership. You get a great summer internship at a commercial space company. And I worked at Blue Origin, which was fantastic opportunity. I just got back a month ago. I had a really good summer, even with COVID. And then obviously you get to meet this great network of fellows, the other fellows who are all people that are just as passionate as you are about space, but about different parts of the space industry. So you get to learn a whole bunch. So honestly, it's an amazing program, and it's all centered on a really great founding principle of honoring Matthew Isakowitz and pushing forward his dream of a successful commercial space industry. So I don't know, what more could you want?
Honestly, nothing. We say it every single segment, but thank you for reiterating it. It is family, and if you think you're not qualified, don't worry about it. The only qualification that you need to apply is you need to care about where space is going, and then look at the actual list of requirements after that. Yeah, for sure. Well, Eric, thank you so much. It was so awesome talking to you today. And thank you to everyone who is watching. I hope you guys have had a great time. If you have any questions, you know where to find us. MatthewIsakowitzFellowship.org or at Matt Fellowship on social medias. Thank you so much for watching today. Goodbye.